Okay, welcome to the Xena R-9 mid-cycle for Cinder. Um, we've got several topics to discuss, and Tushar has arrived, so we can kick things off with the reset state robustification questions that he had, and let's work on that. So Tushar, are you connected? I think you're muted and not videoed.
Hello?
Oh, okay. Okay, I think we can hear you, so go ahead and
Okay. Actually, I have a question that last time I asked about group and group reset, group snapshot. So, do we really need to cover that in this spec? That's my question because we already have a privacy policy.
can you say, I had to switch to my headphones because I couldn't hear, so sorry. Can you ask your question again?
We already have a privacy policy for group and group reset state that users should not use that. So do we really need to cover group and group reset robustification in this spec? That is my question. And because if we Google for the command group reset state, so it does not show any command for reset state for group and group snapshot. Only commands for volume, backup, and snapshot, not for group or group snapshot. So how if user can't find the command, then obviously he's not going to use it.
I think it was introduced in a micro version 3.14, I guess, and it exists like I provided a link in the last Cinder meeting.
So I think since we have other reset state operations for groups and group snapshots, we probably should look at them as part of this work, at least as far as the spec part of it.
Sorry, I'm looking at the spreadsheet. Let me put the link to that in here too.
I think it doesn't cover anything related to this particular question as of now, right?
No, not for group and group snapshot. It's for other three API, volume, backup, and snapshot.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. So I don't know. I mean, it seems like, right, it would be within the scope of this to do the reset state robustification for the group and group snapshots, but I don't know that it has to be done like right now. Or am I completely missing the point?
No, I mean the options are basically we try to do it all in this first pass, or we just do volume, snapshot, and backup now, and then make a similar change later to cover the remaining items.
Yeah, I mean,
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
either way is probably fine. I mean, the volume, snapshot, and backup stuff are definitely used more than groups, so it's not unreasonable to do the current set first. But we are basically going to just end up doing another pass of the same kind of work, I think, later to cover the rest of it.
Right. So I think, Tushar, it really depends on, what your constraints are on spending time on this.
And if you look at the spreadsheet, there are like many more than 400 and 500 situations different. Then user can request an invalid. So we have to really add all the exception state for that. Like if they are in, if you look at an ing state like updating, creating, so user if in between uh, request a command, and then that will be a problem. So do we really have to have all the exception cases for that? So there are like, if you see in a spreadsheet, there are more than 500, I guess, different commands in different situations.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through all these. So, do you need help prioritizing which ones would be important to get done first, or what are you thinking?
Like even if we cover only volume, it's a lot of code and a lot of exception cases for that.
Right.
There are like 20 states, and all states have a different combinations.
So I imagine, if we think of the users who are doing this are operators who want to try to fix something. So I imagine it's mostly changing error states into, something else.
And it's also changed the state only in database, not the actual state. That is also a problem in reset state. Reset state only changes state in database, not the actual state of a volume or anything.
Mhm.
Well, for some of the cases, I think for the cases where we were talking about changing the state to detached for a volume, it might actually manipulate some things, right? But my assumption was that a lot of the checks are probably going to be on just the to state in your table, like instead of necessarily from state A to state B. I think some of these are going to be that you would never want to just reset state to extending or so. So I'm not sure implementation wise that the matrix is quite as huge as it looks.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, so for something like that, where you're putting it to a completely ridiculous state. I guess it doesn't matter what the source state is.
Yeah, I think that was the idea. Because if you just reset a volume into downloading state, like nothing
Right.
good is gonna happen by doing that ever. So you can just ban that as a destination in general and not have to do it from each particular starting state.
And as in maybe last meeting, Eric mentioned that these all recess states are admin only. So is it really necessary to do this spec? That is also a question.
Well, I think the idea with this was that operators,
Yes,
right? You get a call from a customer and you've got to fix something, and we don't want them. And so there's several approaches they can take, right? But one they might try to do is just go ahead and reset the state to something. And so we want to give them some kind of message like, don't do this.
yes,
So
there
even though it's
error
admins,
message or exception, but there are like many situations, different, all combinations. What we need to do?
well, I think, right, so the operator does have access to the logs, so they can dig in and figure something out. But I think the idea behind this was to give them some kind of immediate feedback that, right, changing the state of this volume to downloading doesn't make sense. So try something else.
Right, and one of the ones that we've actually seen come up with our users or our admins, customers, is doing things like they have a volume that's attached and they want to get it back to an available state. Well, you can run reset state and set it to available, but then you end up with an inconsistent volume in Cinder because it's set to available, but there are still attachment objects in the database because you didn't say to clean those up. And we want to prevent, admin from doing things that just result in invalid states of volumes or snapshots or other objects.
So I guess what I'm thinking, I mean, Tushar, this is a pretty amazing spreadsheet you put together of just all the state transitions we can have. So that's probably useful for reference, but I'm wondering whether, as a first attempt at this, maybe just isolate to one of the more frequent cases and then see where that leads in terms of what kind of information you can get usefully to the operator so that they can fix it. So I think the one Eric just brought up is useful, right? So changing the state to available. So maybe just concentrate on that. And possibly the ones where it's kind of, where we know in advance there's no reason to allow anybody to change it to downloading, or to some of these other ones.
I'm wondering if you really, in general, ever want to reset a volume to anything other than either available or error. I'm not sure that resetting it to almost anything else actually is going to result in anything good happening. So, and what I'm getting at is that the list of destination statuses that are actually useful and sensible may be fairly small.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, right, an operator could set a volume from some weird state to error just so that the end user or their customers aren't going to mess with it, or they know that there's something wrong with it. While the operator is investigating what exactly the problem is and tries to fix it. So
Because
Hello?
a lot of statuses are related to an ongoing operation. I mean, where you have creating, uploading, retyping, extending, managing, restoring backup. Resetting to any of those that's got an ing in it basically means that you're going to have the volume in a state that Cinder's not really expecting it to be in because it's not actually doing that. I guess the only thing that we need to make sure of is if there's any admins out there that are using this as a trick to work around failures or bugs or anything to, re-trigger something to happen. But I don't really know if that's the case for anyone or not.
and you're going to hate my next suggestion would be, I wonder if we allow a force. So the
Well,
initial thing, if you try to change it, we deny it with a message, but we could allow you to do it, or does that defeat the entire purpose of this whole effort?
well, I've considered the same thing because there's always the potential that if there's some weird bug or some weird scenario that it might be useful to do something really unexpected with this. So it might make sense to allow that. I think another idea, uh, sorry, I'm not sure if Tushar.
Hello?
Yeah, Tushar, we're having trouble hearing you, I think.
That's my purpose. So I have a question, what should I code? What is the requirement of this thing? I'm going to add an exception case, then there is a lot of code and it will take time for review also.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a good answer to say exactly what you should code for this.
Oh, Brian, on what you were just mentioning, the spec should have an idea in it of moving the allowing admin to still do something that we wouldn't want them to do and putting that into the Cinder manage command instead of doing it via the API. I don't know how people generally feel about that, but that's another way to go with it as well.
So the idea would be we could remove this from the API as a dangerous call and just say it's available via Cinder Manage.
Yeah, I think we've avoided going that direction on some things in the past because I don't know that you can always assume that they have an easy way to Cinder manage, and I don't know. I'm less convinced that that's a great idea than I used to be, but it's one way to go.
I wonder whether the thing to do here is in the spec we have 2 specific cases to block. Maybe we should just do those and then see what happens in terms of what kind of feedback we get. Does that seem reasonable, Tushar?
What to do?
So the 2 cases specifically in the spec are resetting a volume to available when there are attachments.
When the attachment is set to available, but if it has an active attachment, then how can it possible? If it don't have an attachment and still it's not in available state, then we can change. But what if it has an active attachment?
Right, but I think the idea is, right, the command would allow an operator or someone with the correct permissions to just reset the volume to available, even if it shouldn't be.
So if a volume is stuck like in attaching state, then we reset the volume state to available, then the code should do like the terminate connection part, the remove export part, and calling OS script to disconnect the volume. So all these things should be done in that part.
I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I think the idea is not so much to say, hey, you just said make this volume available, so now I'm going to do everything to do that. I think the point of this is just we have this tool that allows an operator to reset the state that's displayed with the volume, but there's some cases in which it's a bad idea to let them go ahead and do that. And one of the cases would be they're trying to make the volume available even though it's in a current state where we know it shouldn't be available. And so we should block it with a message.
So if they did in that scenario, if they just say reset to available, it would fail because there's still attachments. But if you pass reset state available, attach status detached, which is one of the options that exists now, that one could conceivably go force detach the attachments and remove exports or whatever, because that actually would make sense with what was requested.
Yeah, I mean, I had, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had the same point. Like, okay, so you're saying like we need to reset the volume and attach state at the same time to be able to do that. But I'm just saying like we can't put an in-use volume to available state if it has attachments. That was my concern.
All right, so I'm not sure if we're making progress here or not. Tushar, have we been any help at all with your questions? I think Tushar's mic may have dropped. All right, so I think the consensus here is maybe, okay, so Tushar's having network issues. So let me type this in the, I think that the summary is we should pick a small clear case and start with that and then see where we go.
I would still vote for trying to come up with a list of destination states that are just never good and block that as well, because I think that should be fairly straightforward.
So, okay, so destination states like the ones that end in ing. That should never. All right, that seems reasonable, because the idea is with any of those, you would be transferring into the middle of a workflow, and that's pretty much not what you want to do. I'm clear on that. But the basic idea is that you can't force a volume to be suddenly into the middle of a workflow just by putting the state there. And so we don't want to allow that to happen. And that seems to make sense. Okay, any other observations? Hopefully this is helpful to Shar, but we can revisit again if you have more questions. Okay. All right. And if Tushar gets a better connection, we can revisit this during today's meeting because I think we'll have time. Okay. Thanks, Eric. And we'll follow up on that some more. All right, next thing on here is what to do about the enable v3 API option. As several people pointed out on the patch that removed the block storage API v2, this option is kind of pointless because if you don't enable it, you get nothing, and that's kind of pointless. But the problem was we follow deprecation policy. Anyway, the short story is I put something out in the mailing list, and the TC is perfectly okay with us removing this option without having deprecated it because it doesn't really make sense to keep it. So, yippee. So I'll put up a patch doing that as soon as I have an opportunity. So that's just a quick report on that. All right, Python-cinderclient, next steps. Okay, so the Cinder client, we removed the V2 we removed the V2 classes, removed V2 client support, and what am I trying to say? We released, that's what I'm trying to say. We released a version of the Cinder client, 8.0.0, and so that's nice. So now what do? I'm going to take my headphones off, sorry, because I can't hear myself and it's really disconcerting. Okay, hopefully everybody can continue to hear me. All right, so what do we need to do? So here's the situation. There are a couple of things we need to do right away, and then there's some other stuff that could be done as follow-ups. But just frankly, based on what's been going on in the Cinder community. I don't think anybody's like itching to get at the Cinder client immediately, so I think we can wait and discuss the longer term stuff at the PTG. But anyway, so short term, I've got to patch up to master to stop using the Tempest timeout in our functional test for Cinder client. And we can discuss it if anyone thinks anyone objects to it, but basically our code in the functional test does have its own timeout handling, but that's being completely bypassed by this other timeout. So my proposal is that we not use the other timeout, we only use our explicit handling. Now, it only seems to happen, well, from what I can tell, it depends on where the build lands when Zool goes to do it. Sometimes, so what is it coming? We've got a test that does backup, create, and delete. So it creates a volume, creates a backup, deletes the volume, deletes the backup, all in the same test. And sometimes it takes longer than others. So some tests, that whole thing's done in 45 seconds and yippee. And then other times it takes more than 65 seconds. And then that's where we're hitting the 60-second timeout that's causing the test to fail. So anyway, I don't think, ordinarily, right, you never want to fix something by simply increasing the timeout. But I think here, what's happened is we already have timeout handling, and we're short-circuiting it. And a lot of times it doesn't matter, because if you seem to build on OVH nodes, they seem to be pretty fast and everything cruises through. But if you hit some other clouds, this thing shows up. And the main problem is, right, we've already spent over 45 minutes building DevStack just so we can run these tests. So I don't think increasing the timeout, our handling is to use 120-second timeouts for the volume build and then the backup build. And then I think it's like 60-second timeout for the teardown for deletion. So I think I'm probably making too much of a big deal about it, and nobody's going to object to this. But anyway, what I'd like people to do is go ahead and approve this patch so we can stop seeing those failures. So that's the main thing. So it's shown up in functional tests. We run them in the check, but not in the gate. But, you know, it causes you to have to rerun those tests, of course, but also the Tempest, the big Tempest test. So we just waste a lot of resources. So I guess my request is please take a look at this and then leave comments if you disagree. Otherwise, just approve this thing so we can backport it and get this fixed. Okay, in the Victoria branch, I've got a series of patches. We've approved them in master and Wallaby, because what turned out was that our functional tests for Python 3.6 were reporting success, but they weren't actually running any tests, which is kind of bogus. So we've got that fixed. It took a while to get this going in Victoria because, for reasons I don't quite understand, well, anyway, to use Python 3.6 and test it, we should use it in one of the supported platforms for Python 3.6, which are CentOS 8 and OpenSUSE 15. So that's what I did. I chose to use CentOS 8, I guess because I work for Red Hat. I'm not sure, but it seemed like, anyway, to get stuff fixed, I knew who to go to. So anyway, so for Victoria, there was a problem. I think that's solved. So please look at that patch and let's approve it. And then we'll have our 3.6 test actually running for Python-cinderclient. Sort of a side note here is with these functional tests, we spend, in excess of 45 minutes setting up DevStack, and then the tests themselves, when they pass, take under like 5 minutes. So if anyone's interested, so I would just sort of like to add more tests on general principles because, since it's taking so long, we might as well test some more stuff. But that's a side point. So if anyone wants to look into that, feel free. All right. The other thing we've got, I put up sorry, when we removed the V2 classes, we broke Horizon. And so I was able to fix Horizon in a way that maybe in retrospect wasn't that smart, but because it introduced a workaround. What was happening was Horizon was using some V2 classes, and there were no corresponding V3 classes, even though theoretically there should have been. So we fixed that for Horizon, but we didn't fix it for anybody else. And in particular, we didn't fix it for people who are still using V2, which hopefully there aren't many of, but want them to switch to V3. You should be able to just, right, if you're using any CinderClient V2 classes, you can just switch that to V3 and everything's fine, and then you can get more functionality, but at least your initial script should work. Well, you can't actually do that, because if you're using any of these classes, then right, they don't exist, and so bad stuff happens. So I've got a patch up for Wallaby. So it's line 56 in the Etherpad to add these classes to Wallaby. It also adds a test to check to make sure that there are no other V2 classes in such a situation, that there aren't corresponding V3 classes. So I know that these are the only two. We're not going to have to go back and do this. So anyway, I would like to get this patch moving along, because so we can release a new Wallaby, and probably we should put this back a little bit more to some of the older Cinder clients. I think it's just something that was not, I don't know how many people it impacts, but that's basically the way it goes. Okay. And then finally, I'm also noticing we don't hit this as often as the other failures from the timeouts. But I am seeing occasionally we hit these, and it's another one of these, we spent 45 minutes building the thing and then the test fails. We have these, and I think it's just because in a lot of these, a lot of the systems that are running our tests, we're running in 8 threads, and the default for quotas is 10. So if you've got any tests that are making more than one volume, you're probably going to run into this. And so every so often you do see it. So we should probably fix it. Now the problem is exactly how do you want to do that? And I've looked at there are 3 options basically. So I just want feedback on what we should do. So there's a glance approach. So I've got a link there. Now what glance does is they just explicitly, if Glance is using Cinder as a backend, it just goes ahead and ups the quota for the service user, so that they can store the images that are being used in the tests, and that makes sense. We can't do that directly, because for the functional tests we're doing, it's the Tempest user who's creating all the volumes and stuff, not the service user. So we would need to do something else. And I'm thinking, so we could try to figure out who the Tempest user is, and then, actually, I was looking at that, it seems to be complicated. I don't think that's the way to go. So the other thing is configuration in DevStack, like you do with some of the other things, just so that we can just say, the default quotas will be, I don't know, 20, or I think they make it 50 for Glance, but we can make it some number. Because we're not testing quotas, right? We're just running into a quota ceiling that we want to eliminate. So I think that's an appropriate way to do it. But I was thinking, if we're exposing the quota config, maybe we don't want to do it just for volumes. We can do it for snapshots and for backups too. I don't know. I could use some feedback on whether I'm overthinking this and just do the volumes and get this over with, or do something else. The other thing we could do is, because I'm looking at the quotas, right? And 10 volumes seems pretty low. Like, really? So I was wondering if we should just up the quotas, but then that just seems kind of like a really bad idea. I mean, just in Cinder. So we just raise the quotas in Cinder, and then I guess eventually you would run into this problem maybe. So that's another reason why it's a bad idea. So we should probably leave the quotas the way they are in Cinder. Anyway, does anybody have any feedback on how we should go about doing this?
Brian, I
the
think you
puppy test.
mentioned, yes, sorry. I think you mentioned service user, whereas service is a project where Tempest creates the resources. So, yeah, but everything else is, yeah.
Yeah, I think, right. So if I understand the question, yeah, doing it for the service user isn't going to work for the Tempest case because the person who's running into the quota limit is the Tempest user who's running the tests.
No. Service is the project, I guess, where the resources are created. It's not dependent on the user. Quotas are for particular projects, I guess. Or I'm just
Well,
misunderstanding the whole concept.
yeah, I might be misunderstanding what you're asking. I think the change that Glance does is it's the Cinder service user who's getting
Yeah,
quota. Yeah, and that's good because that's the person who owns the volumes that Glance is creating.
but we are setting quotas for project, not the user, I think.
Oh, I see. Right, but
The
it would
service is
just,
the project. Yeah.
yeah, I think I'm sorry, you're right. So it's the project's quota, but I think we'd need to make a different project's quota. So which we could figure out, but I'm just wondering, instead of doing that, if we just raise the default quota for the dev stack run for any user, then that should make this work. I mean, it would probably also make it so that the glance change isn't really necessary anymore, but that's kind of a different issue. So I guess what I'm asking is, if I put up a patch to devstack to the libcinder, just so that you can set in local, what do you call it anymore, local RC or whatever, or the local.conf, just volume quota default, I guess, and make that whatever. Does anybody have any objections or better ideas, I guess? All right, well, that's something to think about. I'll go ahead and put that patch up. And I guess there's really no reason to increase. I mean, while I'm doing it, I could just expose the quotas for snapshots and backups. Should I go ahead and just do that just in case we need it, or is that overdoing it? I guess that's what I really want feedback on. All right, well, I'll just think about it some more. I will put up a patch. I will put something on the mailing list saying, hey, give me comments, and then we'll take it from there. Okay. All right, and then long term about the Cinder client. If anybody knows somebody who wants to work on Cinder client, what we've got is, the way I did the removal patch was I sort of left infrastructure there in case we come up with another API. So we've got the Cinder v4 API, and so we need to have this ability to figure out automatically which client you want to use and that kind of thing. I don't know if that was a good idea or not. So that's something for somebody to think about. The other thing is there's some strange logic in the client class. I guess where it's figuring out which API, which version of the block storage API is supported, that I'm not clear. Well, I guess it's more complicated than it needs to be. So I left some fixed me's in there. So that's something, if somebody's interested, they could pick up. And then I guess the other thing is, just general cleanup probably, but there's no point worrying about that now. Okay, any questions, comments? All right. All right, next thing is the OS Brig Xena release. So that's coming up in a week and a half, basically. The big things, two big things that I've noticed, and if anybody's aware of anything else, please let me know. We got the connection agent that Zohar's proposed, and I believe he's here. And we've also got, Sophia has some patches up to address the LVM related seg fault problems. So we addressed them on the Cinder side, but Sophia's porting those fixes over to OS Brick. So that should help keep our gates moving better. So please look at those. But I think we need to get some feedback to Zohar about what's going on in this the connection agent patch.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Yeah, okay. So Zohar, yeah, if you have something to say, my main thing is we need to review it.
Yeah, so if we have time now, we could have a quick high-level talk over it. Overall, there is a spec for it, so that can also give a nice overview. There are, I think it's very non-invasive. I think the only main issue with it is like duplicating of this whole REST API that comes with the vendor-specific part of the agent, which is part that talks back to the backend and asks for replacements for replicas and things like that, which is part of the responsibility of the agent. So we could talk about all of this. I'm just here to get any kind of feedback, hear anything.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about so basically what we've got is the Kioxia driver needs to communicate with the backend, and this agent needs to communicate with the backend, and they're both doing similar calls. So it would be nice if somehow we could abstract that.
Okay.
But we haven't figured. But you don't want to make Brick depend on the driver.
Exactly. So that's out of the question, right? That's
Yeah,
what I understood from the previous discussion. So that makes perfect sense. We don't make Brick depend on Cinder. The easiest choice is the way it's done right now is with duplication. There's another way, which is we've thought about it before. I'm not sure how the whole requirement system works, and can we basically add a Python package that will come as part of the official OpenStack requirements, which will be vendor specific. So this package will basically contain all of these REST clients, etc. So this is probably the only other solution that I'm thinking about.
Yeah. So I guess probably so in terms of maintaining this, I think ultimately you're going to want, obviously, to get rid of the code duplication. But I don't know that, I guess the point to ask here is, does anybody object to that for Xena until we figure out a better way to handle the packaging? Sounds like people don't have a good suggestion. All right.
Yeah,
So
people might be out of touch. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So if you have some time, what I think I'd like to do is really after let's get through the rest of the topics, which I think is not going to take us all that long. I think we should just do kind of a live review and just start looking the code over, because I'm really worried about getting this reviewed. So I think that would be a good use of time. So if you can stick around, that would be good. How does that sound to you?
So it is quite late for me.
Oh.
Yeah, that makes a little bit of a problem.
Yeah,
So,
actually, let's do it now, because the other stuff, yeah. All right.
that will be a wonderful. That will be really wonderful.
Well, I think it would be
We are
helpful
here.
to everybody, because we're all sort of obligated to review this, and I think people just haven't had time. So let's go ahead and take a look at this OS Brick patch. Let me see if I can Okay, so we got the NVMe-OF connection agent. So I guess first thing with the, so it's the REST client is probably the, so if we look at the REST client, this is the code that's duplicated from the driver, is that correct?
Yes, the REST client.
So I guess on the plus side, we've already reviewed this, so
Yeah.
driver, so that's good.
I cannot see what you're viewing, so I only see
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
top of
No.
the screen.
Yeah, because I'm not, this is the downside of using Blue Jeans is if I share my screen, I can't see anything. So, which is kind of
I remember the feeling.
yeah, so that's kind of so what I'm anticipating is that everybody's looking at this locally. So really, as far as the REST client part goes, I think unless somebody has like a severe reaction to including it here as just read code, we probably don't need to worry about it.
So the most invasive part of this change
Okay.
is the change to the connector. So there
Okay.
are a lot of overlap between the agent and the connector. So a lot of all the methods that involve connecting to NVMe devices and putting them all together into RAIDs and handling the replicas of the RAID, MD, Linux RAIDs. So all of this stuff, since it's overlapped, and since the way we decided to make this agent is such that it's not a Cinder process, or it's not a spread of any of the OpenStack services, which was a previous approach. That is just a console script, basically. So in order for this to work in a seamless way, it was needed to have its own context, root wrap context. So instead of the higher level OpenStack service passing down an executor with all of these specific methods and objects, what was necessary for the console script was to use privileged methods without having to reference itself. So essentially what happens is that all of these methods that are in the connector right now, which over time could also be put into a certain kind of library that could be shared by other places as well. But I think it still is an okay place to be in the connector. All of these methods are now have been moved to use either privileged methods or run their own root wrap execute. And this is done for the agent, basically, and for sharing, code sharing between the connector and the agent, because there's a lot of overlap. So I think that is the main change. Now, the thing about this change is that it's only being done to the replicated mode of operation. So looking at it from the last cycle when we introduced all of this new NVMe-OF stuff, all of these changes that I'm talking about right now, they're only affecting the part of the NVMe-OF driver that is handling this new code, basically. So the SBDK driver and the previous mode of operation is untouched. So this is basically my main overview of the level of invasiveness of this change. So it is also not perfect. I think that it's a missing one little part, which is the setup config, which I've think I forgot to put inside it, and there are actually a couple little fixes to the agent that are just specifically logical, just logic changes that are some improvements to what it is, the way it is now, that I'm also gonna push into it. Also, I'm now bringing up the whole CI to work again. We had some of our internal issues, without having to go into it. But basically, I'm going to update this patch set. So, but the only updates that are going to happen is adding one setup.config, which is this console script. So as we discussed, as was discussed in the PTG, the last one, that we will make this connection agent as a console script. So then in the OS brick setup config, this is just another change that I think I just forgot to put inside of this review because I just noticed. But besides that, it's basically gonna be the same.
Okay. Any questions for Zohar while he's here and we got him? Okay. All right. Yeah, it would be good if people could review before the Cinder meeting next week, so that if we have questions and issues, we can discuss them, because the brick release has to be the week after that. So this is the only big thing coming into brick this cycle. So that's good, but we do need to review it. So I'll commit to reviewing this, of course, but I guess what I really need to do is reach out to Gorka to review.
Yeah.
And then I just need some other cores to kick in and take a look. All right, so you're getting the CI working. The SPDK, I don't know what the status of their
I think actually I saw it do a successful run on this OS brick change. So
nice.
yeah, so the CI we do have successful. So this obviously it does pass CI. CI also does not test the agent. So this is something else. So there would be needed to be additions to Tempest, integration testing logic to actually test this agent, because these are completely new cases that we're talking about. If you look at the scope of the agent, so this actually will not affect really any of the functionality that's already being tested by existing CIs, because this is just completely new functionality. We're basically talking about self-healing and monitoring. So that's why but the CI is passing, and I'm just getting our CI system. I mean, I don't want to go into it too much right now, but it's basically still is this handcrafted set of scripts. And it's basically working. I just wanted to have it keep working automatically without babysitting it. But it's basically there. But like, if in a sense of passing all the gate tests, so the basic tests are good. Also, we are doing our manual tests for the self-healing part, which is what the agent actually does. But again, I think the most important part of the review here is in the invasive changes, which are mostly to the connector, which are also not so bad because it does not touch code that SPDK uses, but we just want to be safe, right? So we just want to remain on the safe side, and that's basically it.
Okay. Any questions, observations? All right, so this is a priority to review for Brick, so let's do that. All right, thanks, Zohar.
Thank you very much, Brian. Really appreciate everybody.
Okay. All right, and then Sophia, is that I only found the one site fault kind of patch, or there's some other ones, or is that the main one?
Okay. It's only one. I
Okay.
squash everything there.
Oh, okay. All right, great. All right, so good news, only 2 patches that we need to review carefully for Brick. I'll just leave it at good news. Okay, thanks. All right. Next topic is sqlalchemy-migrate to Alembic. So the situation there is there are a bunch of patches, and I believe Stephen is no longer going to be working on them because he has moved to a different set of responsibilities. So the importance of this is that sqlalchemy-migrate is, I believe, right now, and it may be unsupported. And it's unsupported because the new technology to do this is Alembic. So I don't know if anybody's particularly interested in database stuff, but we're going to need to work on these patches and adopt them, basically.
So he got the guts of this off the ground already, right?
Yeah. Right, and that's what these patches are. But I don't think we've really merged anything that does this. So, not sure which one's the first one. So it's a stacked series of patches. I guess my question here is there anyone who's particularly interested in database work who wants to adopt this?
I don't, well, I'm not a core and I don't know too much the topic, but maybe it will be useful to stress more the fact that this needs to be done, basically, because otherwise
Right.
Cinder will be the last remaining project using sqlalchemy-migrate, and that's not good.
Right.
Sorry, Brian, I'm late to joining. Are we talking about this NVMe over F connection agent now?
No, we're on to line 70.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't. Okay. All right. I guess what I need to do is I'll take an action item to look through these patches more carefully, and then we may have to have a special meeting to parcel out how to make this happen. Because as Luigi points out, I mean, I think it's unsupported. We could continue to use it, but we would have to take over maintenance of the library, and that just does not seem. It doesn't seem to be a good idea at all. So.
How about we have a festival? That's been proven to be pretty effective for getting people to join and review.
Yeah, I think. All right, let me. When's our next festival is coming up in like 2 weeks, I think. which might not be soon enough. All right, let me look into this, and then I will contact people on the mailing list about how to festivalize it, and we'll take it from there. Okay. All right, next thing, QCOW 2, any observations or anything? All right, sorry, this sucks. We got to do it. I will have to organize a better way to make it happen. And thanks for Stephen for getting this moving. And unfortunately, he's not here. Okay. Yeah, all right, so line 73, we do have to discuss this one. So here's the situation. There's several versions of QCOW 2, right? And anyway, QCOW 2 v2 is really old, and some distributions of Linux don't want to support it anymore. So the talk, at least for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, is to have read-only support for QCOW 2 version 2. So QCOW 2 is fine. It's just this old ancient version that people shouldn't be using anymore, that they don't want to support. So, like I said in the Etherpad, right, it's been since December 2013, QCOW 2 v3 has been the thing everybody's using. So basically, if you've been running OpenStack since Icehouse, all the QCOW 2s that have been created by Cinder have been the version 3. So that's cool. So it's only going to be an issue for Cinder if somebody decides to manage some volumes that are in QCOW 2 format, and it's this old format. So the question is what to do about this. And I guess, so one thing is I don't know what to do about this. I mean, the main thing is what you want to tell operators is don't do this, right? Because that's not good.
Do we support managing a QCOW 2 volume?
I don't know, actually.
I thought that we did not support that. With Cinder manage, I mean.
All right, well, okay, so then that would, for some reason I was thinking if we don't support it, then bingo, problem solved. All right, so.
I think, I don't know, Rajat looked at that code more recently than I have, but I thought that when you did Cinder manage with NFS, we didn't allow QCOW 2 there because of safety concerns. You gotta take the dash out of Cinder manage, though.
Oh, right.
The other Cinder manage. Is there some exposure here for consuming glance images that are old?
Well,
if it's read-only support, I guess not, because it's just going to get converted to raw.
Yeah, so I think from the perspective of I'm thinking not, but I think it's just, but I should bring this up with the glance team just to make sure they're aware of it. Right, because my understanding of so I don't know a lot about the NFS driver, but my understanding is, as far as Cinder consumers are concerned, they're just dealing with the volume. And it just so happens, in order to implement snapshots, sometimes the format of that volume is going to be a QCOW 2, but that's kind of an implementation thing that doesn't impact the end user.
Right, and the reason that we didn't support it, I thought, on NFS was because the operation didn't have a way to specify the format, which you would have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But since Rajat added the format tracking functionality, that may have changed. I'm not sure, honestly.
Yeah, if I remember thinking back to that patch, that was it does record the format when the driver does the conversion. But I don't think, all right, so we got to, okay. All right, so if not, whoops. All right, so let me maybe grab Rajat or take a look at this and just verify. So if we don't support it, we'll continue not to support it, and it's not even going to be an issue. The only thing I could think of is if there's a legacy volume from pre-Icehouse. This might be an issue. I don't know if that's something we need to worry about.
Well, I think it's rare enough that we can mostly get out of it by telling admins to go run, QEMU image convert to fix up whatever they have that's still in the old format.
Okay. All right. Okay, so this might not be a bad thing. Okay. Yeah, all right. Let me look at it, and if it turns out that we do allow this, then we'll talk about it at the Cinder meeting, because we'll have to. Yes, okay. It may not be a thing, so let's just keep it there. Okay. Any other observations about this? All right, thanks, Eric. It's nice to get good news. Okay, Keystone, trust support, and Cinder. So this came up sort of, so somebody made a patch, somebody posted a patch. I think I gave it a negative review, or at least was negative about it. But it showed up, there's a list that people are generating of pain points that projects could address. And the idea is that one of the community goals might just be address operator pain points in your project. So somebody put this on that list as something that's a pain point for Cinder. But my feeling about this is I just don't want to do it. So I'll leave it at that. So I'll put that comment on there. I believe you can do this with service tokens, and if you can't do it with service tokens, then that's the way this should be fixed, not introducing this whole new thing of trust. I'm not clear on how well trusts are supported in Keystone to begin with, and I really don't want to introduce that complication into Cinder if you don't need to do it anyway.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a while ago at some previous mid-cycle or something. So wasn't the notion that if you are using service tokens that are set up right, you won't have the problem that this is supposed to solve anyway?
Yes, and that's my understanding. So I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and look at the things. I think I put that comment on the bug, and then the response was, no, it's still a problem. But I still don't. I would rather approach it through, if there is a problem with our service token code, then I think we should address it that way. But I think the problem may be on the receiving end of the service token, because we generate service tokens correctly. So if there's a problem in the big chain of things, so for people who don't know, the thing about the service, the problem that this is meant to address is sometimes we get a request that's come through several other services, and the user token is passed along in the request, and that's what we use to validate, because you want to use the minimal amount of credentials. So the idea with the service token is that in a lot of deployments, the security team wants token life to be short, because you don't want these things hanging around too long. But on the other hand, they've got to be long enough. If you've got a chain of operations where Nova requests something to Glance, who requests something to Cinder, who requests something from somebody else before the thing can be solved, the token might expire. So Keystone introduced this notion of service tokens, and it's supported by the Keystone middleware, so that in addition, so that when you make the request to a service, so when Nova requests that Cinder do something, it can send along a service token. And then if the user token has expired, the service token can be used. Keystone will recognize, oh, I've got a valid service token, so I will allow this user token to be validated. And then that way you can make long-running processes work seamlessly, more or less. And there's some constraints around it because everything's got to be configured properly in order for this to work. But as far as I know, Cinder handles this stuff correctly. And we've got the code that supports sending a service token along with our request to other services. Anyway, okay. So I don't even know why I wanted to bring this up. So anyway, I guess if anyone's really interested in trusts or in their cloud is seeing this problem, I want to bring it to your attention. But otherwise, I still want to focus on the service token way to handle this, not using trusts. So the Keystone trusts address the same problem, but you request a trust from Keystone, and it requires more setup because the service user for Cinder has to be a recognized user in Keystone who can request a trust, and then a trust is a way to get a token on behalf of somebody else and use it. But you can start to see, I mean, if the service tokens are hard enough to configure, getting the trust working properly is even going to be worse. So anyway, I don't sense that anybody disagrees about this, so I'll just leave it there. So I'll just put a note. We are not. Okay. Next thing, surfacing backend information to operators. So I came across, I was reviewing something recently. So if you take a look at that link, actually, I can do that. Well, I'll just do this. All right, so it's a patch for one of our drivers. I forget which one. I think it's, well, you can look at the patch. But basically, we do have in our service objects, there's a field called it's called disabled reason, right? Which takes a string and it gets populated under certain circumstances to give an operator information when they do the list services or show service call. Now in this particular case, I believe it's got to do with enabling replication, and then under some circumstances, replication is being turned off or something. So anyway, something's happening in the driver, and they want to report back out, hey, there's a problem with the backend, or maybe not even that there's a problem, but just some information that replication is off because one of the nodes is down or something like that. So you can read my comment here. So I think this isn't what the service, what the disabled reason field is for, is to report backend information, but there may be a reason. So I get that. So what I'm trying to say is, like, people look at this patch, there may be another way to do this that would be better, or it could be disabled reason is perfectly okay for this, or it may be if we want to surface information about the backends, we could do it maybe here, but maybe by using a different, what am I trying to say? A new field or something? Or, I don't know, there may be some other way to do this.
Well, I don't think what they have is correct. I mean, disabled reason has some particular purpose that's not this.
Yeah, and that was basically my thought too. So what I didn't. So it seems like it's a use case where you want to get information out to the operator. So what's a better way to do that, I guess, would be the question.
What is the information? Replication is disabled because your cluster's not set up right or something?
Or one of the nodes went down. I forget. It's been like a week since I looked at this. I thought Garish was here. He's showing. Garish, are you around?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, Brian.
So have I described? So could you describe your use case just a little more generally?
Here, the disabled reason, what we are showing is in the backend we have nodes for each storage. For some reason, the nodes may go down. So in that case, we're collecting the node information, and we are setting if that node belongs to site 1, and we are populating some message. Site 1 is down in that.
So the disabled reason field on the services is for when an admin purposefully turns one off, right? That's an operation that I think a Cinder admin can do.
Yeah, I think that's one. That's when we set it. In the suite.
It's administratively disabled, not functionally not working.
Yeah.
It feels to me like this should be a separate field for replication enabled, disabled, or something like that. Or feels like you're right, Brian, that a new field should be enabled here.
Yeah, I was just wondering. Yeah. So what I wanted to get a sense of from other driver maintainers. I mean, do you have a similar use case where you want to get this information out? And if you do, how are you doing it now? Or do we need to add something so that we can surface the information?
Well, it seems plausible that there would be a general cross-driver interest in is replication healthy and functioning, which I think is what this is trying to get at.
Yeah.
So would we want to just change the service object to allow a new field on it?
I'm not sure if that's even the right object to put it in.
Yeah.
Possible, but I'm not sure if that's the right place or not.
Okay. So I guess, so to give Garish feedback right now, so we don't want to do that in this patch, but we are open to surfacing the information if you can think of a different way to do it. So that would be.
That should be fine, Brian. I mean, whatever we want is some generic solution. Any driver. Might be if it is addressed with some other patch means we are okay with that.
Okay. Yeah. So why don't you take a look and make a proposal about where to surface this, and then we can make sure some of the other driver maintainers look at it too, because it seems like a useful thing to surface, and so let's try to do it in a way that everybody can use and that makes sense for operators. So good. All right. Thanks.
So,
all right.
Some backends replicate pools and groups, right, and not the whole set. So that's part of why I'm not sure where this should get mapped, because if you have a backend that replicates 3 separate pools of volumes, then I don't know that trying to just do this on the service object really works.
Yeah, I mean, we can have multiple replication targets and only one of them may be down. How do you represent that?
Right.
Yeah, I don't have an idea at the moment. Okay. Yeah, I think what happened on this patch was it looked like this would be an easy way to get this information out, and so that's what they did. Okay, let's see what they come up with, and we can take it from there. Okay, general project maintenance issues. Basically, please review these patches. So, I mean, the main issue right now is we decided to remove, I think it's a lower constraints job. I don't even remember at this point. But there's several projects where we haven't done that yet because the patches are sitting. So please take a quick look and just approve them. Yeah, and then I put third-party CI there. So as you know, two things, right? So the idea that we could get, what we're saying, third-party CI, two things. The comments thing hasn't really improved, so we need to address that. And then also just the third-party CI reliability needs a review. Right. So anyway, yeah. So it would be good if stuff happened. So I just want to renew my request that it would be good if someone wants to volunteer as a third-party CI liaison for the Cinder team to sort of keep a handle on things. Because I'm just not doing it. So I'll just throw that out. So, yes. So if you're looking for more responsibility in the Cinder project, maybe your manager thinks you're not doing enough upstream work, then this would be a way to do that. So if you're interested, I mean, basically, right, we have the third-party CI, we've got the reporting stuff that Sean had set up, but we need to, I don't know what we need to do. We need more ideas about getting the third-party CIs more reliable, responding better, you know, just that in general. Okay. All right, and then, so anyway, so if you're interested in being third-party CI liaison, let me know, or talk to me about, we'll figure out what it could be. But I personally am not putting sufficient time into monitoring the third-party CIs. And yes, so I guess I should do more. All right, and then Eric's got a note on here that the Mypy patches could use some review. So I don't know if you want to say anything, Eric, or just bring that up to people's attention.
It's still a thing. I'm just obligated to mention it every time we meet, I think.
Okay. Yeah, we may need to have another Mypy festival, although the database stuff is, I mean, we can walk and chew gum, I guess. But I'm really worried about the database situation. But we'll probably have a database festival before we do another Mypy festival, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay. we're getting close to the end of the cycle, as you can tell by R-9. So next thing is the brick release at R-7, and then at R-5, we've got milestone 3, which is the feature freeze. So keep an eye on things, please review as you can, etc. Any, I don't have anything else, and I don't want to talk more than I have already. Anyone got any odd? Sorry.
Do we have a list of feature patches to review before the feature freeze anywhere?
It should be in the blueprints for Xena. Let me grab a link real quick.
What about people like me that have feature patches that don't have a blueprint?
Probably the thing to do is just make a blueprint, so that we got a way to find it. Unless somebody else has other ideas, I think this is probably the easiest thing to do. Here's the link. So looking at that, let's see if add that here. All right. I don't know if that's even visible. Okay. Yeah, I should probably update this. Hopefully some of this stuff has actually been implemented. Lost my actual window. But possibly not. Yeah, I guess I need to go through these and see. The brick GPG encryption support. I don't think it's, well, yes, it's not going to make Xena. So the state, I think I mentioned this at some point, the state of the encryption thing, it was depending on a change in Barbican that's being held up. But the latest proposal was to not rely on the Barbican, I believe it's called the secret consumer API. But I don't know that we're the blocker for that at this point. So yeah, so I think so. Our brick priorities for review are Sophia's patch, that's the squash of the fixes, and the NVMe OF agent thing. Those are the primary things that need to be reviewed for that. Yeah, and then these other ones, I'm not sure the status of these. We'll have to go look. So yeah, so if you, so the freeze for, so features being added to drivers don't require specs, but I do ask people to file blueprints so that we can track them. So if you're working on something that is a feature needs to be merged before feature freeze, please file a blueprint so that we can track it. Because we can work from here to review the associated patches. Any other questions or?
Mine actually is there. I just forgot about it because it's not actually linked in my Garrett review.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but remember, I believe the linking has been fixed, but for a while, after the change to Garrett, the Launchpad Garrett thing was broken. So yeah, so check to make sure that you. So if you have,
I also didn't put it there.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, if you've got a blueprint and you also have a patch, please check your blueprint to make sure there's a link to the patch so we can easily find it. And if you filed a blueprint that's not here, let me know because I still have trouble navigating the Launchpad blueprint system. And there's a way that you can propose a blueprint that I don't see it until you tell me. I mean, when I say I don't see it, I can't find it in a search. But if you give me a direct link, I can see it and approve it. So if your patch isn't here, if your blueprint isn't here and it exists, please contact me and let me know so that I can make sure it shows up on this page. I think that's it. Okay, and yeah, so Fernando, I think the deadline for driver submissions, I think, is next week. Or 8, which would theoretically give us 3 weeks to get those things done. So yeah, so you're okay. It's on the main schedule. So just for people who are interested, so you can take a look at the Xena release schedule just to see all the exciting stuff that's happening, but all the Cinder things are on there. The driver features declaration is R-8. So, and I think, well, I don't just read it. Yeah, so you just need to make sure you've got your blueprint proposed before the meeting on next week so that we can see, talk about these and give you feedback. It's the basic idea. All right. I'm just laughing because it's just, I feel like I've been talking and nobody else has. All right.
Are you still tracking the GPG encryption stuff? Is that still moving?
Well, it's sort of moving. All right. So so it is still a thing. They're still working on it. The current, right. The Barbican Secret Consumer API was kind of what do you call it? Kind of an integral part of the proposal. And in order for that not to be a big holdup, I think the idea is to go ahead and implement it without the Barbican Secret Consumer API and then add that later as a, enhancement, I guess. So it is sort of a thing. They're going to rely on Brick. What am I trying to say? I guess what I'm saying is, if it doesn't make Xena, I don't think that's a big deal at the moment because everything's moving slowly.
No, I was just curious because I had some interest in helping review that, but I haven't looked at it lately to really see.
Okay.
What's going on.
Yeah, I mean, from a project priority point of view, the NVMe OF thing is more important to get that agent reviewed since we've sort of committed to that. And then the GPG thing would be secondary. So it's still a thing. They're still planning to do it. I think I encourage them to go ahead and do it without the secret consumer API just to get it moving along so we can get testing set up. Because I believe, well, it's like anything else, right? It coordinates several OpenStack projects and is slightly complicated. So there's going to be bugs. So I'd like them to get testing set up possibly in the Cinder Tempest client or the Glance Tempest plugin, either one, just to do end-to-end testing that has in a dev stack that's got Barbican and Nova and Glance and Cinder, just to see if this whole thing works properly. Because they also have to, there's some client changes, I think, to kick the thing off. But anyway, so for that to work, they do need the brick stuff merged. But the last meeting was at, I don't have the impression that it's going to happen in time for, yeah, and actually they can work with an unreleased version of brick. So because they need brick, but if they're going to use the Tempest plugins to do the testing, they could use a checked out brick instead of a released brick. So once we release brick, we're not supposed to release another one until after the coordinated OpenStack release. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking out loud, and this isn't very helpful. So it's still a thing. It would be good to review the brick patch that adds the GPG stuff, but it's not a priority for R7, R-7. So we want to do the NVMe OF agent and the other. So I guess you won't be wasting your time, but don't not waste your time until later in the cycle on the GPG stuff. I don't know if that was helpful or even remotely answered your question. So
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So I think like Luigi if they're using like Cinder Tempest plugin or Glance Tempest plugin, right? They can just use they can just use master, right? They don't need a released version of a library. Yeah.
The Tempest plugins usually use the last version of Tempest, so Tempest Master.
Oh, okay. And then as far as like consuming like OS Brick.
Oh, so by default, OS Brick is a library, so the test uses the last released version. You can override that, and that's what we do in the OS Brick Zool jobs, where we explicitly say that we want to use the last version of OS Brick.
Okay. All right.
But that's a general policy, just to be clear. So libraries are taken from the last available version, not master.
Okay. So it won't be it won't be a blocker to them getting some kind of CI set up using unreleased brick code. Good. That's all. Okay, great. Thanks. So yeah. So I think we won't be holding them up by not including the GPG stuff in the first Xena release of OS Brick. I think that's good. Okay. Anything else? All right. I was hoping to leave you a little more time, but we got like 12 minutes or so. Please go look at the NVMe OF OS Brick patch so we can get Zohar some feedback before the next Cinder meeting. And also, I'm sure that, everyone will have comments, so please go ahead and leave them. Any other general observations, questions, comments, pep talks, jokes? Yeah, all right. It looks like everybody's had enough Cinder mid-cycle for the day. Okay, I will stop the recording.